All right, so first off, thank you everybody for coming. I actually prefer, this is the most impactful part we're gonna have, is right here, right now. And I'll tell you why. So before I get into it, my name is Ron Chinzer. A lot of you guys I already know, so thank you for coming. Give yourself a round of applause for actually showing up, because it's tough just to get out here. And the reason that's worth celebrating is we did have a whole bunch of community members sign up to come in here today. And then on Tuesday, I went out on foot with one of our students. We have a partnership with Qualifying University, and we wanted to go out and hand out some flyers and do personal invites and to get a better sense of what's happening before we come in today and talk about stuff that, without having an actual insight of what's actually happening in this area. So this town hall and these town halls going forward, they were planned a year and a half ago, and I'll give you the highlight as to what happened. So myself and my partner, that's Detective Jason Kondo, he doesn't get to do the talking because I'm better looking and easier to look at. It's the truth, I'm sorry, Jay. But really, about 3 years ago, we were tasked with the idea of how do you get gang members out of gangs. Okay, the Toronto Police said, listen, every year we go out, we arrest gang members, and then we leave communities, and stuff happens, and sometimes the problems get worse or they continue to grow, but we need to find something else. So Jay and I spent about 6 months to a year touching base with a lot of you in this room, figuring out where do we go from here, how do we solve this issue, and what we had found was all across the world, there's no single answer to get a gang member out of a gang. But what there is there's a lot of success in terms of comparables to how do you prevent somebody from getting in a gang in the first place. And once we realized that and we looked over who needs to be involved, we realized very quickly that the police, we're like the last resort. Okay, we're 18 and above, we're 15 and above, but in between 0 to 15, there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens that sometimes community members or parents or people don't realize that, oh, there's signs here. So today the idea was to be able to not only teach people the signs and kind of what we learned and where we learned it from, but also provide you a tool to be able to do this yourself. To give you a highlight for today and kind of how it's going to go, we did invite some community agencies here, and the reason we did invite them out here was once you kind of identify what some of the issues are that you might need help with, or areas that you want to explore further, the idea was you're not supposed to go through us, or if you want to, you can, but the idea was to introduce you directly to those people so that you can have that help without having to contact the police at all ever. Our end goal for this is to reduce gang membership and violence, ultimately, but before that, our end goal is to never have a negative impact with any kid that comes from this area and hopefully see somebody get out of here in a blueprint model. What I mean by blueprint model is all we need from each of these communities is just one person. We just need one person to break through, and they set the blueprint for everybody else. And when they make it, that's who we highlight and that's who we build up. So I'll give you some of our agencies a chance to come up here. If you are a community member or you're another agency, this is a great chance to integrate and to learn more about the agencies, and I'll just have them come up, and if you're okay without speaking without a microphone, if you guys can have 5 to 10 minutes and kind of go through what you do. So now we're down to the gang prevention, right? And in this room right now we have some community members that we've talked about before. There is real obstacles for them to overcome, and thankfully some people have already stepped up and said they're going to be able to give us some advice and guidance going forward, and that's the whole point of this. That's absolutely the whole point of this. This integrated gang prevention task force, you see where it says Toronto Police? Our goal and our aim for this in the next 2 to 4 years is for Toronto Police to vanish, and it just to say integrated gang prevention. That's it. And that integrated partnership includes everybody and anybody. Yeah, we're leading this discussion, but by no means does it mean that we're going to take care of this going forward. We need to find the best people and the best organizations to do this going forward. Unfortunately, most of the people in this room represent agencies and organizations. Fortunately, most of the people in this room represent agencies and organizations. And really, to have big impact on the people who actually need it, it's going to take this. All right, it is going to take this, but more importantly, it's going to take the people who actually live here that are unfortunately in the back of the room. I get it, it's all good. All right, but the first part of this is really, what was the aims of these town halls, and that's the aim. It's straight up, right? The idea was to get in here to raise some awareness onto something a little bit bigger called youth gang risk factors, which is exactly what's behind me. Connect you with services, which we kind of went over before. Identify and empower community leaders, which is, you know, the community leaders term, it's such a weird one. And I'll tell you why it's a weird one is we look at community leaders, realistically they're champions. All right, and the reason why champion has such a valuable element associated to it is because they're few and far in between. So for the community members that are here, that's you. All right, there's many others that signed up to come in here, and unfortunately they couldn't make it for their own personal reasons, but that's what separates the champions from the participants. And for us, we want to focus on the champions as best as we can to build you up, because I can't do this for you. I can't do this by myself. Right? Nobody can, but you can. And all you need sometimes is a little bit of a push in the right direction, and maybe some tools and some capital to get you going. And then what we're going to get into, and maybe the off-the-record conversation, we'll be gaining insights and understanding, and then kind of what do we do going forward, where do we fill the gaps. And these are the gaps, all right? And I didn't know about this till we got into this about 3 years ago. Well, gaps are gaps in service, right? There's something called a gap analysis where you look at what services are provided, but where are the obstacles? For example, today, this town hall, what are the gaps in getting community members to come out? That's a massive gap. That's a gap we need to fill. We can't just magically come up with a solution because it looks good, because some PhD put it in a book and said, here you go, and get lost. Stuff changes. And when things change, we need to adapt. And what better way to find out what's actually happening by having input from those who are impacted the most? Look, I've been policing this area for 13 years, in and out, right? Not only in Rexdale, but all over the city. And I come and I go. Yeah, do I spend a lot of time here? Sure, but I don't live here. I don't shop here for grocery. I'm not here as a community member when there's shots that get fired at there's a crime scene up across the street. So it's almost unfair for me to stand before you here today and say this is what we're going to do, but it is what it is, and this is where we're going to go. But the idea is to find those champions and really develop you and polish you and get you going forward. We gave out handouts at the beginning because we said we wanted to cover off some stuff, right? And in there it just tells you, it breaks it down to types of gangs. You can take a look at it and online resource, all that stuff. You can take a look at it in your own time. We're not here for that. That's just nice to know, but it's not the absolute need to know stuff. It's just stuff that sometimes it does shock you to see it, and you can look at it and recognize it in your life or your family member's life or somebody that you care about. But I'll ask you here in this room, right? We have representations from many different organizations. We have businessmen, we have academics, we have community members, police officers, city staff, people who lived out life. What's the purpose of a gang? In your experience. And this is the interest, right? We have to, listen, I'm not judging anybody, like at all. I 100% I'm not judging anybody, and I hope in this room we can have an open and fair discussion about what the purpose of a gang is. Yes, sir. Family. Protection. Right? Relationships. A sense of belonging. Right? Those are all reasons somebody might join a gang, but what's the purpose of a gang? And this is, the reason I bring this up and the reason why we guide things in this direction is because we attach human emotion very easily to kids that get involved in gang violence and do bad things. And sometimes that's the first part that we see is, man, he's just a kid. Does anybody else think I'm wrong on that? And it becomes emotional and it drives us to want to do big things, but the actual purpose of a gang on a legal sense, and the reason I'm going to give you a legal sense is, we've got to look at what definitions are, and definitions matter. And by understanding words, we're going to be able to associate words appropriately. I don't want to take a group of kids that are hanging out that fit that classification and say, that's a gang. They don't fit that purpose. They might have the reasons to join being, I need somewhere to belong, I got friends, but that by no means makes them a gang. So we need to understand clearly going forward what is a gang, and the purpose and the definition of a gang in every academically cited publication available all over the world is this. 3 things. Deal drugs, control territory, and control debt. Or so collect debt. All right, so that's gangs. So if 3 or 4 kids hanging out here in one of these neighborhoods, is that a gang? No. And why would we do such a thing? Why would we put a label on a couple of kids in an area that might be gang impacted, might have gangs, and say, you guys are gang members because you sit here? It's not fair and it's not accurate. So unless they hit these 3, and unless we have overwhelming evidence, we should be very careful in how we apply that word gang, because it's a dangerous word to use. And what kid wants to be told from a young age, just because you grew up in this area, you're a gang member? And what happens, right? What happens with gossip? Who loves gossip here? Who loves gossip? Yeah, Jordan, I know you love gossip. Listen, the reality is a lot of people, not everybody, a lot of people like to be in the know. And a lot of people like to show up to work and say, what? Oh, did you hear this? Did you hear that? The policing environment is no different at all. So we need to understand what the definition of gang is going forward and who are we going to apply it to. The last thing I want is an officer who's been policing an area, and yeah, there might have been nothing but gang violence that they've dealt with, but to automatically jump to a conclusion and say those 3 are future gang members. Why would we associate such labels? And labeling is a real and a true thing. So our idea is we need to really clearly define what are gangs and what do they do. Simple, straight up, it's three things. Then the question became, well, who joins gangs? So if I were to ask you here now to paint me a picture of somebody who joins a gang based on your experience, all right? And this is the idea. It's not right or wrong. We all have experiences, and those experiences are real and they're true to you, but we have to remove the emotion for it and start adding an objective lens. So if I were to ask you here, if you were to paint a picture for me of a kid who would join a gang, let's just start with what areas do you think they kind of grow up in? Affluent areas? Franchised areas? Some? Urban areas? So define urban. That word is, it's my favorite. Yeah. Yeah. Listen, I'm not an academic by any means, all right, but I am city, right? So urban people say city, right? And so we're already talking about city environments, right? And then what does that kid look like? Is it a boy or a girl? We're talking highest percentage, so I don't want anybody here to be smart. We're going to paint. All right, today's paintbrush. All right, boy, does anybody disagree with that? Are we all kind of, I'm not asking if you're 100% okay with it. I'm just saying, oh, okay, yeah, I'm good with this. Okay, so boy, urban area. Give me his background.
They're colored. The colored.
Colored? What color? My beautiful chocolate complexion? All right. Colored? Right, and now they're colored. Yes, sir. Ah, very much so, right? So circumstances. Yeah, it could be anything, right? That's true. But if I were to ask you guys here and now, all right, if I said to you, I have a solution, we're going to save a kid who's involved in a gang, but I have 1 hour to do it. Let's just work with the city of Toronto. Yeah, trauma background, right? Let's go off of this, all right? Let me just bring this to the lens that I want to look at it from. So I'm going to be totally controlling on this because I'm going to set you up for failure, which is what I love to do. So, if I had an hour right now from today and I said to you in this room, guys, I have a magic pill, and when I give this magic pill to a kid that's gang involved, they're no longer going to be gang involved, they're going to excel out of that environment, they're going to be a champion in that community, and they're going to take off to do successful things. And not only that, every other kid in that neighborhood, they're going to know that person, they're going to do the exact same thing because all they needed is one. All they needed is one from the inside that got out, potentially. Right? And that's a very oversimplified version of it, but I have an hour to do this in the city of Toronto. Where should I go first? Rexdale. Where in Rexdale? Mount Olive, Jamestown, Silverstone. Okay, I'm there. And then now, okay, I'm in that area. Perfect, I got the area. Now I got to find this actual person. What do they look like? What do they look like? Guys, I have an hour. I'm going to give them this magic pill. We're going to change this person's life. But I need direction. I can't do this myself. Uncomfortable? Is it uncomfortable? Okay, black? Right. So, how old? So you said Middle Eastern, Spanish, African, black, 16, 18 years old.
I would say 13.
So 13, young, right? Is everybody kind of, okay, we're painting the picture now here? Now we got that. Now let's go top down because I need more, man. I got an hour. I can't just find, this is still kind of vague right now. What does a person dress like? What do their clothes look like? So tight, low, right? Should they have any other markers or indicators on them? Oh, gang colors, tattoos, jewelry, chains. Okay, so perfect. So now I go to Jamestown right here. I find a black kid between 16 and 18 or a Middle Eastern or Latino kid who's got tight jeans, jewelry, he's wearing the clothes, and I say, I'm going to force this pill down your throat, kid. I'm going to change your life. Is that fair? How many kids look like that anywhere you go in the city? It's a million. So when we first got tasked to do this, two things became apparent, all right? When they say to you, how do you get gang members out of gangs? One is, what do they look like? And two is, where do we go? And we had conversations like this at the very beginning 3 years ago where we had informal sessions saying, what does everybody think? And what we found was, it wasn't always true. So we had to rely on something objective. And what you have in front of you, those gang risk factor cards. So this was published from Public Safety Canada. And those risk factors, which are back here before you, there's 36 risk factors. And what this publication says is the more of these you check off, the more likely the person is to become a gang member. Now, out of these 36, does any of them, or can anybody find me anything that mentions a physical description or a location? Or physical description, I should start with. No? None. Does anything here mention a race or a sex? No. It's risk factors. Perfect. So now we knew there's something way beyond physical appearance that pushes a kid from the age of 0 to the age of 18 into the gang lifestyle. And what you have in front of you, these things, they happen at different times. All right, and here's the real problem we have with this, and this is a massive problem at the get-go, is I was asked all the time from the champions of this initiative within the Toronto Police Service, Ron, what does the program look like? What does the program look like? And now 3 years later, I've said there is no program. And I'll tell you why there's no program. Any people here are good with math, if I were to give you 5 different colored balls, okay, just to represent each of those risk factors, just 5 different colored balls. And I said to you, I want you to make as many different combinations of these balls as you can. How many do you think we could make? I'll tell you the answer, 3,125. So if we have 3,125 different mathematical combinations of different risk factors, what makes you think I got one program for you? What makes you think there is one program? So we had to come back and say, whoa, wait a minute, man, this is way bigger than what we thought. And not only that, that's just the risk factor categories. If I were to actually break down the 36 risk factors, the number is 160 unvigatillion. I'm pretty sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. But it's 150 with 69 zeros after. So if I had one solution for 150 unvigatillion problems, I wouldn't be here. I'd be a trillionaire living on an island. I'd privatize this and go and consult, and I'd be hanging out on a beach. But we don't. We don't. But here's the interesting part with all these risk factors. They pop up at different times. And I'm going to tell you a story. And when I tell you the story, I want you to, if you feel at any point of this story doesn't make sense to you, or you haven't seen it, you haven't experienced it, you can't understand it, by all means, guys, this is a conversation, pipe up and say, whoa, you're wrong, this doesn't make sense. And I'm going to paint the story for you. The first risk factors category. And I want you to imagine a mom at home who lives in community housing, and she's got 5 kids. Out of 5 kids, the middle kid, right, and all these 5 kids are under the age of 6. And there's no father. And mom's at home, she's got 5 kids. The middle kid, out of these 6 kids, doesn't even know it yet, but wants attention from mom. And for the parents in this room, when you're washing the dishes and you can hear your kids, is everything okay? They're making noise when you're washing your dishes? Yeah, everything's good, right? What happens when you're washing your dishes and you don't hear anything? Now you go into ninja mode, right? You go into stealth mode. You sneak around the house, you kick that door open, I caught you. So now this 3-year-old kid, 1 of 5, single mom, community housing, all of them live in the same house, same bedroom, starts to clue in that, hey, when I do naughty things, mom's starting to look at me. And the mom says, what? I have 5 kids. I'm by myself. I got to figure this out. I don't have the energy for this. This kid's always getting in trouble. So then what happens is, not the mom's fault. This is the cards that were dealt to mom. Now you have this 3-year-old kid that starts to develop these neural connections in their brain that when I do this behavior, I'm getting fed here. Or I'm getting fed here, which is what I want right here, or a fulfillment. And from the age of 0 to 7, this is proven, kids operate at a theta wave, which is a state of hypnosis. And in that time period, what they're doing is they're collecting data from all around them for not what do I need to do to succeed, what do I need to do to survive. Very different. So now they're in a survival mechanism at the age of 3, and now this kid, says, okay, when I do these poor behaviors, I get what I want, it's attention. They're not doing it on purpose, they have no idea. Now this kid becomes 6 years old and goes to school, right? And for anybody here who remembers kindergarten, I remember it clearly. And I remember there's one kid in the class that we never wanted to play with. Why? Because he was terrible. Wanted to fight everybody, wanted to punch everybody, wants to kick everybody. And now this 3-year-old kid who already understands in the classroom, or at home, that, hey, when I do bad things, I get attention. Now this kid becomes 6 years old. Kid goes to school. Well, who's the replacement for mom in school? A teacher. And now this kid who really has developed poor social skills, get into the school environment. And anybody here who's a teacher or had that background or has kids in grade 3, have you ever, or grade 6, kindergarten, ever go there and see that one kid that you're like, tell your kid, I don't want you to play with that guy? Come over here. No, we don't talk to those guys or bullies. So now this kid who's 3, who only gets attention back at home when they do naughty things, goes to school, but already has a reward mechanism that when I do bad things, I get what I want. So what happens in school when that kid does bad things? What happens? What does the teacher do? Attention. Individual attention. They put the kid off into a corner sometimes. They start doing independent work. They start bringing in special teaching assistants to help this kid succeed in school. Now here's the thing. People say you can't fail in school now. 100%, potentially. But just because you passed doesn't mean you were successful. Oh, not at all. So now the 6-year-old kid, right? He's already wired. He says, I got it, man. And when I do bad things, I get what I want. I get the adult attention. I get the mentorship. And now at the age of 9, I don't know about you guys, but when I was 9, I was kind of left on my own, right? When I was 9 years old, my parents were just like, get out. And what did they say to me? You got too much energy. Get out. You got to be home before the streetlights come home, right? And anybody here who grew up in the city, or might be even right now, even yourself, man, kids, is it normal in the city of Toronto to come across 7, 8, 9-year-olds playing by themselves with their friends? Has anybody seen that before? You walk in a community housing or you walk in any neighborhood and there's 7, 8, 9-year-olds. And me, meanwhile, when I have my kids, I'm sitting in the bushes with a sniper rifle and war paint, watching everybody to make sure everything's okay. But these kids, because what happens with mom and that same kid, mom says, man, you got too much energy. Go outside, dump your energy. So the kid goes outside and dumps his energy, and now, for the first time, this 8-year-old, 9-year-old kid is out in an environment, and when they're in the environment, are they more likely to find kids that think like them or less likely? So now all of a sudden, this kid finds 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 other kids that all the parents said is, you got too much energy, get out of here. And for the first time, this kid's found a place to belong. These guys get me. We get it. We feed off of the same thing, our firing and wiring, how we operate. Our thinking is the exact same. Exact same, and now we got this heavy connection. Now from the age of 9, something happens between the age of 9 to 15. And now we have the individual risk factors pop in. Where at the age of 15, you have a full-fledged gang member, a self-admitted gang member. I'm not talking to police, I'm not talking to law enforcement, I'm talking for the ones in the social spaces, the ones that self-identify on social media, that tell you that you know way more of the story than we're ever going to know, because there's levels of trust there. Right, so now this 15-year-old kid from 9 to 15, maybe at the age of 8 or 9, their mom got him a bike. Right, what happens is they got this bike for the first time, right? Mom struggled, managed to get this bike. Doesn't matter where she got it, she got the bike, gives it to this kid. Here you go, kid. You're playing with your friends, I need you to be mobile, you want to do fun things, here you go, kid. Now this kid goes, that bike gets stolen from somebody else. Kid comes home and he tells mom, and he says, Mom, my bike got stolen. What's mom's response to this kid? What do you say? Yeah. Listen, my mom would have blamed the shit out of me on that, right? My mom would have said, you idiot, you had one job, you had to take care of this bike. Do you know what I did for this bike? And you're just so careless with it? So what happens is a year later, mom gets him another bike, bike gets stolen again. Both times gets reported to police, and it's Toronto. How many bikes are there? Tons of bikes. What are the chances of us finding a bike, realistically? We try. So now they've had 2 interactions with police. They said the bike, the most important thing to me, was stolen. The thing that my mom put a lot of pressure on me, stolen and is gone. And then all of a sudden, there's a bit of a more disconnect at the age of 10, 11, and now this kid goes missing. 11, 12, 13. Reported missing multiple times by mother. Right? Mom calls the police and says, listen, he hasn't come home in a couple days. We go out, we talk to the mother, where do you think he is? We do our investigation. Maybe we find him, maybe a day later, kid comes back home, mom calls back police, he was out with his friends. We show up to make sure everything's okay, where were you? Kid doesn't tell us the truth. Goes reported missing again, this time we find him, and who do we find him with? That group of friends, right? And now when we find him with that group of friends and we do a bit of investigation on the friends, we realize, oh, these have all been reported missing. And where are they popping up? What type of neighborhoods do they pop up in? Do they go missing and show up in really affluent areas? No, they just find little pockets to go into, right? They find little pockets and they have to be entertained. And then, at the age of 14 and 15, that's where they start doing serious violent criminal offenses. Now we're talking about weapons possessions, drug possession, drug trafficking, shootings, stabbings. Now we're on the path to that. And then something happens at the age of 15 to 18. Either this trajectory goes worse or it goes better. And right now in the news and in the media, what kind of picture are they painting? Is it worse or better? It's worse. And we don't even need a marker. We don't even need a point to say it is worse than 5 years ago. It is worse than 10. Who cares about 5 or 10 years ago for this purpose here? If it's bad right now, it's bad enough that we should do something about it. And at this point here, this is where we see what's happening now, where the community steps up and says, hey, enough is enough. Somebody has to do something about this. Is that a fair statement? All right? Even the community says, man, we're done with this, man. Shootings during the daytime, shootings in all these other neighborhoods. Somebody has to do something about it. And that's where law enforcement gets involved. Because the number one way to combat gang violence, not gangs, gang violence is to arrest those committing the crime. Okay, that's the number one way to combat gang violence. And that took us on a whole other journey. And I want you to look at this. There was a study done in Los Angeles of a gang of 300 gang members. And when they did a study, they broke it down and they realized that 90% of the gang, or only 270 people, were involved, had an average gang membership span of 1 to 2 years. And they were out. And when they left on their own. They found a girlfriend, they found a boyfriend, they were a victim of a crime, their friend was shot and killed, their parents moved, they had other opportunities. And in almost all of the cases, with the exception of certain types of gangs, they left without any violence. Okay, you were just gone, you were moved on to better things, good luck to you. But on the flip is, 10% of that gang was responsible for everyday criminal decision making. 10% of that gang was responsible for murders, setting hits, sex trafficking, human trafficking, drug dealing, drug trafficking, auto theft, home invasions, 10%. 10%. So once we focused on that, even with us as law enforcement, we realized, okay, we have two goals now. Our one goal is to find that 90%, provide them social support services to reduce that time period of a year to 2 years to hopefully a couple months and in and out of a gang. And the other one is to find that 10% to hold them responsible for what they do. That 10% are kids recruiting kids into gang. 100%. Jason and myself have done multiple debriefs. Okay, and what a debrief is, for those of you who don't understand it in the law enforcement lens, is where somebody gets arrested and we have an occasion to come in there and have a conversation with them to find out what's actually happening. And we had a 14-year-old kid who told us that at the age of 12 he was recruited into a gang. And I'll ask you here, how old do you think the person was that recruited him into a gang? 25, what else? 16. So now we have a cycle of kids recruiting kids. All right, and when you look at it a little bit further, we can go on forever and peel back the layers, but we're at the point now where we have to do something. And when Detective Kondo and I were tasked with figuring out a solution to this, we kind of found one. All right, we kind of found one, but it's very difficult to do. The solution lies around a framework, all right? And I want you to think of this. Imagine we got a problem, now we're going to put a box around that problem, all right? There's really no lid, there's no bottom, there's no sides, but we got a frame we're going to put around it to say, okay, here's an issue, but we got to look at it through every lens. And the best way for me to describe this to people is through a Rubik's Cube example. But before I get there, the base of all of this, the base of that frame, wherever the base lies, needs these 5 principles associated to it. Community mobilization is kind of what we're doing today. Right? It's getting out there, talking to people, finding out what's actually happening, and working from there. Not working from the other lens of looking at data that comes in and says this is what we need to do. We need to find out some evidence of talking to people and saying, there's things in it that we're missing. The other part is opportunities provision, which is probably the most interesting part because that's where we lie into the business lens. All right, now we have people here from a business background, and I want you to think of this. Warren Buffett, when he bought Detroit, okay, Detroit was going through an economic downturn, it was depressed. Warren Buffett bought Detroit, and when he bought Detroit, all his other investor buddies said, what are you doing buying up Detroit? This place is going down. And his response was, what do vultures see in death? They see opportunity. I want you to think about that. This guy's 4th richest man in the world, and he saw an opportunity where everybody else said there's nothing here. So the opportunities provision are finding those people, finding the franchise population of the city and saying, what are the opportunities here that nobody knows about that you can see? And how do we bolster the economic activity here? How do we create tangible jobs? I'll ask you here now, if I were to open up right here where we are right now, how long does that stay in business? Not long. Why doesn't it stay? Not too much. It's too expensive, right? But what does have? A big name to it, great salary for employees, it's got benefits, it's got a career path, they pay for school and they pay for education. If we don't have those opportunities within these type of communities that are impacted the most, what type of outlook are we setting up our kids for? If kids and family members can't see tangible opportunities in front of them, what do we expect from them? It's unrealistic to expect that they're just magically going to see this rainbow at the end of the road, and that rainbow leads to a PhD and a doctorate and owning your business, unless they physically see the opportunities. There's opportunities there. I don't have the brain for it, but I know tons of people that are business-minded and see opportunities in everything that we can bring in and develop new opportunities. The other part is social intervention, and intervention is a key point, which we'll touch up later really quick. Suppression is kind of doing what we do on the law enforcement end, and we don't hide this. All right, that 90%, that 16-year-old kid recruiting that other 12-year-old kid, yeah, that kid's a victim of a lot of different things. That kid's going through a lot of tough times, 100%. But we need to first stop that cycle, and then we need to deal with needs on that person. All right, we might have to get them into an environment where for the first time in their life they have solid structure. And in that structured environment, that's where we need to start figuring out what's going on with you, what are you missing, what do you have too much of, and where do we balance things out, and where do we provide opportunities. And then the last one, this is the biggest one, and this is for all of us, is organizational change and development. What we're talking about here is the Toronto Police Service, this is part of organizational change. These conversations that I have with you, and the follow-up conversation that we're gonna have that's completely off the record and where we promise the anonymity to everybody, we're gonna go back and bring that up our chain and say, these are all the things we could improve on, these are all the things we're missing, these are the things we need to do. And that's absolutely necessary. We can go out and go find an organization that will act as a consultant and come in, but we've done that in the past, and I'll ask you here, has that worked efficiently well? I don't think so. We've already agreed that it's worse now than it was before. So that would be evidence that this stuff is not working. But further to that, we said we got this box, we got this framework, that's fantastic. Now each side of that box, it's these four. All right, the first part is education, kind of doing what we're doing. And I don't want you to think of education as me telling you what we know. It's also hearing back from you, from all of the organizations, to what is your perspective into this? What are you seeing that we don't see? Right, talking to community members. And this is where the Rubik's Cube comes into play. And for those of you who don't know what a Rubik's Cube is, a Rubik's Cube is a 6-sided cube. It's got 9 squares on each side, and you're supposed to mess around with it, right? And the way you solve this cube is every side is even, one color, one solid color. Historically, the best way for me to describe this in the simplest of terms is, as law enforcement, all we needed to do was make one side blue. And we looked at it and we said, we got it solved. But what happens to the other sides? They might be all different colors. And the other side might be community housing. And community housing looks at it and says, okay, our side is all green, we got to figure it out. But our side is now messed up. Then we go to the community and they say our side is white. Then they realize the rest of it's mixed up. The point of this conversation, the education piece, is for all of us to talk to each other to figure out how do we get this Rubik's Cube solved. And in the process of it, are some sides going to be screwed up for a little bit? Sure. But it's a necessary move to get it to a point of where we actually solve the problem. And that's where the education. The prevention piece is doing this to say to parents and to caregivers and loved ones, hey, take a look. If you can check off these boxes and you're on that path, hey, there's other services that are here for you. Jump into that, find it, and use it. A big part for us is the next one, which is intervention, right? And this is a law enforcement as well as a corrections side. And I'll paint this picture for you guys, for the parents and the community members who might not know about this side. Intervention is a piece that everybody just skips over, right? It never even gets talked about. So everybody says prevent, 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 prevent. Nobody says intervene. Here's the problem. Gang members are like 68% more likely to reoffend, which means that they've already offended in the first place. So how many people live in this pocket that are involved in the criminal justice system that sit on that intervention lens that nobody ever talks about? How many? Probably a lot. Probably the majority of the people that actually need the help that we need to get into sit in that intervention pocket, but instead, nobody ever talks about it. Everybody talks about prevention, prevention, prevention. I want you to imagine this. Imagine there's bridges, right, and they all connect to each other. Unless this bridge is made, the prevention efforts die. Because that's the cycle. So for us, it's connecting with, as law enforcement, because we're the introduction for kids into the criminal justice system, it's connecting with corrections and probation and parole and the court system to say, hold on here, this pocket here, we need to invest our energy into there. And by us investing our energy into the intervention stream, as well as suppression, which is arresting the most violent people in the community that terrorize the community, we need to find champions for the prevention and education piece. We might not be the best as law enforcement for the intervention. There might be other organizations, other institutes that are way better at it. And the idea is to find it. What's also included in that framework is I want you to imagine that story I told you of that 3-year-old that goes all the way up to be 18, right? How many organizations are impacted in that? So that same story I told you about a 3-year-old, 3, 6, 9, 15, 18. So who's impacted first? Family, right? 100%. Where do families live? In a community. Now that kid goes to school, so who's there? It's a school. And as they excel, we found all this framework of all the impacted stakeholders, which the purpose of that was all these risk factors happen at different times. And the first one, there's only 7 of them, or 8 of them, or 9, whatever it is up there. We could deal with 9. That's realistic. We can put a dent into that. 1, because kids are still operating in a special frequency. 2, we have influence. 3, people are desperate for help. I remember when my kids were small, anybody who offered to help, I was like, thank God, here, help me out. So we have really good motivation and influence. But as they get older, those numbers start to grow, and they start to become almost impossible to deal with. So our stakeholders, from a model that we took, was this, right? Great, fantastic. These are all the people we really need to incorporate to stop this. But in the city of Toronto, who we spent the last 2.5 years dealing with, these are all of the agencies we've dealt with. And we're trying them to have a buy-in to see a bigger picture here. Right? That's extremely difficult to do. Right? I want you to think of, for yourself, if you're a community member, wherever you live, I want you to think of trying to organize a garage sale on your street. All right? Or even a potluck where everybody brings food. You're going to have to deal with 2 people who want to bring the same food. And each of them says, my food is the best. And that's difficult. So imagine this level here where we have to really get it. Now here's the thing. We've tried this for 2.5 years. And I'll tell you right here, we're at a different perspective. And I'll tell you what the perspective is. We've tried it for 2.5 years and we wasted a lot of time. It wasn't a waste, because in every failure and every obstacle you learn 10 times as much. But now we're taking a different approach, and the purpose of these town halls was, we're going to build it from here. All right, have you heard the term, if you build it, they will come? We're going to build this, we're going to make this undeniable. And what I mean by we is us grassroots people here who actually do the work, who actually live in these communities. We don't need everybody else, we can do this here. When we establish this here, and we do this properly, I promise you, people will start coming to us, and we're going to start being selective as to who we can get. We do have a website I'll show you quickly for the community members, even for the local agencies. Hopefully the internet's still connected. So if this is our website, great. I'm only going to show you one part of it, which you actually need. If you're a parent, a caregiver, a community worker, a police officer, anybody, and you got somebody with you that you think this person's at risk of it, or you need help yourself, and this is my big thing too with parents, and we've done this. We had one kid who was a very violent gang member that we managed to have a conversation with, and we lost influence on the kid, and one day we decided to go home and talk to his parents. Right? And under the age of 18, we always talk to parents, we always include them. But we decided to go home and talk to mom, and this is the mom of the 5 kids. That story's a real story. That story's a real person. And we talked to the mom, and we had her fill out these risk factors, and she had more risks than the kid. And I want you to think of it this way, in a realistic approach to this, and a real way to explain this is, you know, we think we have a hard life, and some of us do, some of us don't. But I want you to imagine your parents' lives. That was rough. And I want you to imagine their life, and that was rough. And the point is, it gets better. Right? The point is, it's supposed to get better. That's why the mom had more than the kid. It made sense, it goes with it. But for us on this website, we have an option here where it says need help. It gives you 2 options, on your own or with us. With us just means you call, it's myself or Jason, it's all confidential, and all we do is we act as strategists or advisors. We try to connect you with people that you might not be able to connect with. We try to encourage you to do it, as well as try to coach you through some stuff. But if you don't want to get anybody involved, and all our stuff is confidential, we don't share with anybody. But if you don't even want to talk to anybody, you want to figure it out, you just go to On Your Own. And as you go to On Your Own, I have a 60-second video which kind of shows it to you how you do it. You can watch it on your own. But what it does is it connects you to multiple services, right? And if you go to online resources, here, where did I put it? Oh, there it is. Community Asset Portal. All right, there's 3 things here for you. Community Asset Portal, Wellbeing Toronto and Toronto, Ontario. The Toronto Police Service Community Asset Portal, this was done with conjunction with Ryerson University. And what this does is this plots social services around the whole city. So what's a postal code here? Somebody give me a postal code. Yep. Oh, sorry, I got to put 4E3. Ooh, 4E3. If you just pop in your postal code, it zooms in and you can find every social service you need. You just click on the box. You don't need us for this. You can do it from your phone, you can do it at home. Go to our website, I'll give you the link. And once you get those links, you can just contact them directly. And generally speaking, it gives you all the information. It tells you eligibility, application description. It's all there for you. All we're doing is trying to teach you, these are the things to look out for. That's the place you go for help. All right, now that that's all said and done, this is the point. I'm going to turn off the microphone. I'm going to turn off the cameras. I'd like to kind of moderate and host a real conversation about things that we can do going forward to get some insight, free of discussion, and free to go into a different realm. Everybody okay with that? If you're not okay with it, by all means, if you got to leave, the door's there, you can go. But anybody else who wants to stay in, try to find some solutions with us. We can spend half an hour having real conversations and real condensed and straight to the point. Everybody's good? Awesome.